So what is up, people? I'm making this tutorial today because I spent all day trying to make a nice cooldown animation for the power icons for my next game, which is on quantum physics. I hope you'll enjoy it. I didn't find any tutorial online on making your own cooldown animation. All what I saw is this clockwork kind of built-in in Unity animation for the cooldowns. So hopefully by the end of the tutorial you'll be able to make an animation like this one for your cooldown powers, and hopefully you understand also how to make your own animations using shaders. Okay, so let's get started. So I hope that you know how to set up your scene, otherwise it's not the tutorial for you. So here I have my UI image. Actually it's also a button that will represent the icon for my power, and by default you can see that the material of this image is sprites default. So what we're going to do is that we're going to make a material to assign to this image, and we'll control how this material looks using Shadergraph. So right click in your shaders folder, you can create it if you don't have one, and go to create shader. Now as I'm using the URP, Universal Render Pipeline from Unity, I'm creating a 2D render, sprite-lit graph. You're not forced to create this kind of shader, I think. If you're not using URP, it should be okay. You should, I don't know, maybe create a PBR graph, I'm not sure. You tell me in the comments. So I create a new sprite-lit graph and call it as I want. So tutorial cooldown. Okay. Then I click open shader in editor. So first let's create a new sample texture 2D. Okay. So by default it's assigning the correct values, but we never know here if we want to assign another texture. So we're going to create another texture 2D called main text. Here I call it also main text if you want to modify its value later in the code. So I'm going to drag it here, up. So now we can drag these colors here and click on save asset. Okay. Now if you want to apply a material created from this shader to your UI image, you need to right click on your shader and then create material, and here we'll call it tutorial material. Here we go. Here in the main text we can set our icon, and finally we go to our object and we assign the new tutorial material instead of the sprite's default material. So next thing that we're going to do is to create this black overlay that you saw on the icon. So I'm going to create a new color property and call it layer color. Okay, so let's call it also here layer color. I'm going to drag it here and create a new node, multiply, to multiply with the color of your texture. Then we're going to create a new sample texture because we're going to add this layer on top of the image. And then we're going to use the subtract node for our texture, and then put this into color. So then save asset. Okay, go back to your project. There is no change. Because the alpha is 0. And we can see that if we change the alpha, we have a nice fading of the icon. Okay, so actually that's not exactly what we want for the moment. So what we're going to do is to apply a noise to this overlay. So I'm going to create first two properties. So one vector1 noise scale, and let's put it by default to, let's say, 10, and a vector2 because I'm in 2D noise direction, and we name it also here. And by default, let's say that we're going to put 0.1 in X and 0.1 in Y. Okay, so I'm going to drag these new properties here. I'm going to add the time and multiply the noise direction with the time. Okay, then I'm going to apply this movement to the offset of my shader, and then I'm going to modify the UV mapping with the noise scale and a gradient noise. I chose gradient noise. You can put another noise, whichever you like. Okay, here we go. So we have a nice movement of our layer. Okay, we can change the noise direction or the scale to have another pattern, but I like this one. And then what we're going to do is to multiply this new UV mapping with the RGBA of our sample texture. So it doesn't matter in which order you make it. It's a multiplication. And then we're going to use it as an input for our black layer. Okay, click Save Asset. And now we can see that we have a nice overlay of our power icon. So this overlay should show that the icon is not clickable, so the power is not usable. Okay, so we're almost done with Shadergraph. So we need just to add two new properties. The first one will be a vector1 called cooldown, so actually it will be the cooldown time that you will want. Okay, and as we're going to access this with the code, we're going to put a reference, and by default we're going to put 1, and the next property will be a vector2 cooldown direction. So this will be the direction in which your cooldown animation will play. Okay, and let's put by default here 0.5 and 0.5. Okay, so let's drag both on the blackboard. We're going to multiply both values. And we're going to apply this as an offset of the texture of our overlay. So I'm creating here new UV tiling and offset, putting this as an offset, and that just putting it into the UV of the black layer texture. Okay, so you can save the asset and then go to your project. So now, as you can see, everything disappeared, but if we go into our material in the inspector, we can change the cooldown here. If we put, for instance, 0.1, we can see that we did 10% of the cooldown, 0.5, 50%. Okay, and at 1 actually the cooldown is done. Okay, and we're going to change this value through the code. So now if you want to change the direction of your cooldown animation, you can change it here. Okay, so if I put minus, you'll see that it will go this way in the X, and minus Y the other way. Okay, so I put 0.5, 0.5 because I want it to be diagonal, but you can put, for instance, 0 and 1 here, and as you can see, we're having a cooldown that goes to the left. You can also rotate the overlay shader by 90 degrees and increase its size, so you can have linear progression to the top or the bottom, like in most video games. So you do it as you wish. In my preference, we can put it 0.5 and 0.5. Okay, so let's put back this value to 1. And next what we're going to do is to control this cooldown progression through a script. So go back to your game object, and so here I added a button component to click to use my power. And what we're going to do is to add a method here to call when we click on the button. So I'm going to add a new script. So script, and call it tutorial. So let's first create a new public image. A public material. So that will be actually the material instance of our material that we just created, because if we modify the material as is, we will modify it for every sprite that uses this material, so that's not what we want. We want just to modify the material of our object. So to do that, we first take the image as the component of our object, and the material instance will be a new material taken as a copy of the material of our image. Finally, we want to apply this instance to the image. So image.material is equal to this material instance that we just created. Okay, next we're going to create a new public float, which will be the cooldown time that we want for our power. So I'm going to put, I don't know, 5 seconds, and we're going to create the function that we'll call when we click the button. So public void use power. Oop. So what we want to do here is to call a coroutine that will increase the cooldown time that that has elapsed, and if this cooldown time is equal to the cooldown time that we gave above, then we want to be able to use the power again. So we create a new public IE enumerator, countdown cooldown, and we're going to loop until our cooldown is down. So float cooldown progression equals 0, while cooldown progression is less than CD time. Oop. Then if it's less, we increase CD prog by delta time. Okay, and what we're going to do is set the cooldown to our material. So material instance, set float. So here we're going to access the property of our shader. So we need to put the name of the property, and we want to put CD prog divided by CD time. Okay, so when CD prog is equal to CD time, this is equal to 1, and if it's not the case, we return null. Okay, save this. Then we call this function in our use power function. So we wanted to ask maybe why is it needed to encapsulate like this our coroutine. It is because we cannot call coroutines directly from buttons. We can call functions from buttons, and which we call coroutines. Okay, so now here we want to put a new event when we click. So let's add an event. We drag the object. Here tutorial script and use power. Okay, save, and let's try it. So now if you hit play and click on the button, hooray, you have a nice 5 seconds cooldown. Okay, but now, so the problem is that if I click repeatedly, as you can see, we call the power several times, and we're not blocking actually the power for the moment. So let's see into the code how we can do this. So before calling the coroutine in my usePower function, I will check if the cooldown has been elapsed. So what I want to do is transform this CD progression temporary variable into an attribute. So I'm going to add it to the top. Okay, equals 0 by default. And here we can erase this. And here I want to check if CD progression is more or equal to cooldown time, then we can call this coroutine. Okay, and here we want to put back CD prog to 0. So we're almost done. Actually, if we use this code now, we will not be able to launch the power the first use, because CD prog will be 0, and so we don't have elapsed the whole cooldown because we have never used the power. So what we need to do is to change the initial value to something bigger than the cooldown time, so that we emulate the fact that we elapsed a whole cooldown time. So we want to put it here. CD prog equals CD time plus 1. So we have to put it in the start function because CD time is not known before running. Okay, so you can save now and go back to Unity, and now you can see that clicking once will still give you the cooldown, and clicking repeatedly will not provoke the power to be used again. As you can see, there is no other cooldown that are being triggered. So next step that we want to do is to add some nice animations. So what you can do is simply to set a trigger to be launched when you click on the button, and based on this trigger you can add some animations. Okay, so for instance, changing the lights, changing the opacity, and so on. So that's up to your creativity. So that's it, guys. If you liked this video, please support me on Patreon, look my videos, look my projects. I don't have much for now, but I hope I will keep building on for the next few years. And yeah, that's it. Hope to see you soon. Bye bye.